The tribunal adjourned. Details of Noel Smith's evidence sent to Kinseely. Bomb blasts bring travel chaos to Britain for the second successive Friday. The health workers' strike referred to the Labour Court as doctors warn of the risk to patients. And the sneezing season, one of the best-known remedies, is under investigation. Good evening and welcome. Former Taoiseach Charles Haughey has been given a sealed statement from Ben Dunn's solicitor Noel Smith, detailing conversations between the two men. Earlier, Mr. Smith told the Payments to Politicians Tribunal that he met Mr. Haughey 5 times to discuss the matters under consideration by the tribunal. The tribunal chairman ordered that Mr. Haughey should be given the statement to give him the opportunity to be legally represented at Monday's session, when Mr. Smith will give evidence about the meetings.
Noel Smith dropped his bombshell shortly before 4 o'clock this afternoon, while he was giving evidence to the McCracken Tribunal about payments which his client, Ben Dunn, allegedly made to Charles Haughey. He suddenly revealed that Mr. Haughey contacted him at the time of the Buchanan inquiry, whose investigations into payments by Ben Dunn to politicians preceded the present tribunal. Mr. Smith said Mr. Haughey told him he had something he wished to discuss, and the two men met 5 times, 3 times in Mr. Haughey's Kinseely home and twice in a neighbour's house. Mr. Smith said he didn't wish to reveal the contents of these conversations unless directed to do so by the tribunal, because he felt Mr. Haughey was under the impression that he was speaking under confidence. Mr. Justice Brian McCracken said that Mr. Haughey has chosen not to come here today, but it is possible that that might change if he was aware of Mr. Smith's statement. He directed the tribunal's solicitor to deliver Mr. Smith's sealed statement about these conversations to Mr. Haughey. It would then be up to Mr. Haughey to decide whether or not to be legally represented at the tribunal on Monday afternoon, when Mr. Smith will be questioned about the meetings. The sealed statement was personally delivered to Mr. Haughey at his home in Kinseely this evening. Earlier in the day, Ben Dunn's sister Margaret Heffernan told the tribunal that she was flabbergasted when she heard rumours that her brother had given £1 million to Mr. Haughey. When she asked her brother about the payments, he told her, "You can look all you like, you'll never find them." Mrs. Heffernan said that she met Mr. Haughey at his home in Kinseely in July 1993 and asked him if the rumours were true. He said he couldn't be responsible for what her brother said and added that he felt that Mr. Dunn was unstable. When she pressed him about the money, he declined to answer. She later met Des Traynor, who looked after Mr. Haughey's financial affairs, and he totally denied any knowledge of such payments. However, when Ben Dunn was preparing a court case against other members of his family, he submitted a letter which gave details of these alleged payments. Mrs. Heffernan said she met Mr. Haughey a second time at Kinseely, but the subject of the payments was not brought up. At this meeting, Mr. Haughey urged her to try to come to a settlement with her brother without going to court. 3 letters were sent by Dunn's solicitors to Mr. Haughey, seeking the return of the £1.3 million which he allegedly received from Ben Dunn. In his reply to the first letter, Mr. Haughey said he took grave exception to the claim that monies were improperly diverted to him. In the second, he said he had nothing further to add, and he did not reply to the third. Mrs. Heffernan accepted that lack of evidence about the ultimate destination of the money prevented any legal action to recover it. But if any new information was revealed at the tribunal, she said, she personally would favour pursuing it.
And our special correspondent Charlie Bird joins us now from Dublin Castle. Well, Charlie, a day of high drama at the tribunal.
Yes, well, David McCullough described it as a bombshell this afternoon. I think you could go even further and say it was an absolute sensation. It was certainly the sensation of the week here, and we've had a lot of drama here all week. But when Noel Smith stopped at 3:25 this afternoon and revealed that he'd had these 5 meetings with Charles Haughey, 3 in his Kinseely home and 2 in a neighbour's home, it was absolutely astounding. You could hear a pin drop in the crowded tribunal room.
And of course you've been there for the week, Charlie, and it really does seem that each day brought at least one extraordinary event.
Yes, well, the highlight of the week before this was perhaps Ben Dunn's evidence on Tuesday, when he described this famous meeting out in Kinseely after the golfing outing at Baltray, when he went around to Charles Haughey, and at the end of this brief chat, when they had small talk, where he gave him the 3 bank drafts for £210,000 and then said, "There's something for yourself." And according to Mr. Dunn, Mr. Haughey replied, thank you, big fella. Well, we thought we'd heard it all then, but no, today came this absolute bombshell that Noel Smith also had 5 conversations with Mr. Haughey.
Can Mr. Haughey be subpoenaed, Charlie?
Sorry?
Can Mr. Haughey be subpoenaed?
Well, of course, Mr. Haughey, every night after each of the hearings, or the next day, Mr. Haughey is given a transcript, I understand, of all the previous day's proceedings, of what's gone on here. Clearly, Mr. Haughey is entitled to legal representation here, and that's what Mr. Justice Brian McCracken said this afternoon, that in the interest of fair play, before he took a decision on what he should do in relation to what he heard today, Mr. Haughey should be given the opportunity. That's why the solicitor for the tribunal went straight out to Kinseely this afternoon. The solicitor, John Lawless, gave Mr. Haughey the sealed envelope. Nobody else has seen what's inside in that envelope other than Noel Smith.
Well, I gather the cross-examination has been becoming increasingly robust. What was it like for Margaret Heffernan there today?
Yes, Margaret Heffernan, certainly there have been a number of complaints during the week here from the media, who are obviously sitting back and watching all of this, that some of the cross-examination hasn't been very vigorous. It was certainly vigorous today. Some people thought that Margaret Heffernan would only be in for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. She was there for 2 hours, and her cross-examination was indeed very, very vigorous, and it was a very, very strong performance by her.
How do you call it, Charlie? Is this tribunal going to adjourn next week?
Well, what will happen on Monday is we're going to see a number of extraordinary scenes here on Monday. Next Monday morning, the Taoiseach John Bruton will be the first person in. Then we will see Sean Haughey, son of Charles Haughey. He'll be here for his own reason. And then we're going to see 4 government ministers come in here, all to discuss the payments which we all know about for political reasons. And then in the afternoon at 1:45, we're going to see, first of all, if legal representation on behalf of Mr. Haughey turns up, or even Mr. Haughey himself. We just don't know what's going to happen. But I think whatever happens on Monday afternoon, barring an unforeseen mega bombshell, as it were, this tribunal will probably adjourn for 3, 4 or even 5 weeks. If not on Monday, then perhaps on Tuesday. And then we're probably going to see the election campaign take place, because most people believe it's now going to go ahead perhaps on the 5th of June or maybe a week earlier. And the chances are that this tribunal, we will not see the final act in this amazing drama until after the general election.
Charlie, thank you for joining us from the scene of the action. Once again, the English transport